Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. Suneel Gupta says he was the poster boy for failure. So how did he turn that into a success? We'll find out today. Suneel, welcome to the show.
Yo, it's so good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Suneel, I told you I love in your book that the title is Backable, that you begin by talking about the fact that you were asked to be the keynote speaker on a conference on failure. You've got to tell us that story.
Yeah, I'm happy to. You know, I get a phone call from an organizer of a conference called FailCon, which stands for Failure Conference. And it's this humbling experience, Bill, when someone calls you and says, hey, you know, we're doing this conference on failure, and we would love for you to be the keynote speaker. You know, at that point in time, I'd had a couple of failed startups, and, you know, just, my career wasn't necessarily on the rails. And I decided to accept the speaking gig, and I'm on stage, and I'm talking pretty openly about these mishaps, these missteps. And I didn't know this at the time, but there was a reporter from the New York Times in the audience. And so fast forward to me sitting in my apartment, opening up that day's New York Times to see a full-length article on failure with my face as the cover of this article. And now,
just what every parent wants to see. Their son on the cover for failure.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if my parents were all that surprised, but here's the thing. What was interesting was that failure at that point in time had not been all that much of a discussed topic in the business world, but it was starting to be. This was in 2013, and you saw a real sort of, it really kind of entered the zeitgeist, and as a result of that, this article went viral, and there was a point in time where you could literally have Googled failure, and my face would have been one of your top search results. So what do you do with something like this?
Now,
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, no, we have to be fair to tell our audience. You're very open about this, but you're also a lawyer, an entrepreneur, and you teach at Harvard. So you really can't be that good at failing.
Well, you know, a lot. I will say this: a lot has turned around. Although, if you compare column A of success to column B of failure, column B is much larger. And I actually think it's going to continue to be. You know, Bill Gates, I think, once said that success is a lousy teacher. And I think that that's true, which I believe it is, then I consider myself to be very well educated. The thing about failure, which I learned through this experience at the New York Times, is that, you know, the Buddha, I know, Bill, you're religious. I am as well. And the Buddha told us that, you know, every time you get hurt in life, every time you feel pain, 2 arrows are fired, right? 2 arrows are shot. The first arrow is the one that actually punctures your skin, but the second arrow is the one that you actually create meaning with. You get to choose what the second arrow. You don't get to choose the first one that happened, but the second one you actually have some control over. And, you know, the advice that a friend of mine gave me is, hey, like, this is a pretty funny article. Like, what if you use this to, you know, break the ice with people? And so I did. I started to send this article around to people I admired. And I would write in the email, I'd write, hey, you know, as you can see, I clearly don't know what I'm doing. Would you be willing to grab coffee? Let's do a phone call together and just give me some advice. And the response rate to that email was just abnormally high. People I never thought would have responded to that wrote me back and said, hey, this made me laugh. Sure, let's grab some time. And these ended up being open, honest conversations, because typically when we reach out to people, we're reaching out under the guise of success, right? Here's my ambition. I'm ambitious. This is what I want to do. Here's how you can help me. This is more kind of like, look, I'm failing, and here, check out this article, and I'd love to get your advice. And because I was open and honest, they were open and honest. And what I realized through these conversations with really extraordinary people, from Oscar-winning filmmakers to celebrity chefs to founders of iconic companies to investors and unicorns, you know, what I realized is that, you know, oftentimes they were not backable in the beginning of their career. Like, if you rewind the clock, they started their careers out not really knowing what they were doing, kind of like me. And though today they are these backable people that are able to sort of get into the room and inspire us to take a chance on them and take a chance on their ideas. And what I realized is that this mysterious quality that sometimes we say, like, either you have or you don't, either you're one of those people or you're not, is actually not true. In the vast majority of the cases, these were learned behaviors. And that's good news because you don't have to be a celebrity. You don't have to be a CEO in order to make yourself backable, in order to make yourself one of those kinds of people that other people want to take a chance on and want to rally around.
So wait a minute, are you saying there's still hope for me?
There's still hope for you. But
all right. That's no wonder I like your book so much.
The truth is, Bill, this is really an intervention for you, a backable intervention.
Well, thank you. I'm sure our director, Sean Novak, lined this up for me, and I'm glad he did it. Now, let's tell our audience, too. You talked to all these people. You obviously got some good ideas. We're going to talk about those next. But just so they know there's a happy ending, you went from being rejected by every investor you pitched to raising millions of dollars and being named the best new app of the year. Am I correct?
That did happen, yeah.
See, I take good notes on your book. See that?
Good notes. Yeah, you're making me blush. No, I mean, every single investor that I pitched on my company said no in the beginning. Over a dozen investors, no after no after no. And part of these conversations for me was with these people I admired was, well, hey, what am I doing wrong here? How do I make myself backable? Because I think I have a pretty good idea. And the idea was a one-on-one nutrition coaching service right over your mobile phone. So people who are struggling with obesity and diabetes and heart disease could actually have the help of somebody who will customize a diet for them and help them make it stick. I thought it was a good idea, but I just wasn't having luck inside the room. So what was neat about this book is that I found this interesting as from a research perspective, but I was also putting it into practice myself. I'd learn a technique and I'd say, hey, during my next pitch meeting, let me go put this into work. And it was working. I was starting to get different results. So I got to really pressure test everything that's in this book myself.
Well, there's the real endorsement for it because you pressure tested it and I looked at it and I'm looking at after I review a book, I put a little sticky on the front and I have a big yes with plus, plus, plus after it. So you've gotten several pluses in addition to the yes, which means we have to get you on. We cannot accept a no from your agent or from you or your publisher. So I'm glad we got you on today. Now, what did you learn from these people when you talked to them? Obviously, you learned something very important because you went from nobody wanting to invest with you to making millions of dollars. So What was it that came out that was so interesting?
Yeah, there were 7 qualities in the book that really surprised me, and we can talk about any of them. Well, one of the first things that really jumped out was that I really thought that I was going to find that backable people had a certain style of communication, that they were all going to speak with a certain level of charisma. But that didn't really happen to be the case. In fact, I think that there were certain backable people that were much more extroverted and gregarious, but I would actually say the vast majority that I spent time with they did not have classic communication styles. They did not speak with hand gestures or make great eye contact or make great use of pacing. What I found is that it's not charisma that is the sort of common denominator. It's conviction. Backable people take the time to convince themselves first, and then they let that conviction shine through in whatever style it is that feels most natural to them. And if you want a quick example of that, just go look up the number 1 most popular TED Talk of all time. And what you might be surprised to find is a very un-TED-like presentation. It's a brilliant talk. It's given by a guy named Sir Ken Robinson, and he kind of stands with one hand in his pocket. He sort of meanders on and off script. He naturally stood with a bit of a slouch, but you believe every word that he is saying because, again, backable people convince themselves first. The whole idea is if you don't believe every word that you are saying, then they can't believe. So instead of spending our time creating, highly designed or polished PowerPoint presentations, what we need to be doing is taking more of what I call in the book incubation time, where we're really spending the time to make sure that we believe everything we're saying. And then again, just letting that shine through with whatever style it is that really fits you.
Now, I would have made that same mistake because when someone says, is he or she a good salesperson? they just seem to be likable. They start talking to me, and it's like they know my whole history. Bill, how is your white car? How is your a small dog? Gee, you know so much, and all of a sudden we're relating to one another. So I would have made that mistake that it's just personality, but it's really the conviction you found in your studies, right?
I think that's right. I mean, I do think that there's it's not to dismiss any of that of getting to know people and being able to connect at a human level. And I think that there are certain likability characteristics that get you in the room. But when it comes to actually closing the deal, when it comes to actually convincing an investor or having a hiring manager decide to take a chance on you, even though you may not be the perfect candidate for the role, that I think that runs to a much deeper quality. And that's really quality number one in the book, which is being able to convince yourself, you know, and one of the things, just to take it one level deeper, is like, how do we do that? How do we actually convince ourselves? Right. And one of the first things that I ask readers to keep in mind is that oftentimes we're in situations where we're with friends or with colleagues and inspiration will strike. We'll get an idea. And our sort of, I think our initial sort of, impulse is to want to share that on the spot, right? Just share it, see what happens. And what we found is that a lot of ideas inside big companies end up getting killed, not inside the conference rooms, not inside formal pitch meetings or formal meetings in general. They get killed in the hallways. They get killed around water coolers in very casual conversations, because what happens is we end up blurting an idea out before we're actually ready to share it in a way where we can actually have a back and forth. And we look around and we don't get the response that we're looking for. And we sort of tuck it in a drawer and we walk away. And it happens all the time. So one of the first things that backable people tend to do is they almost do a little decision tree in their head. And they ask themselves before sharing the idea, is this something that I have higher conviction for or lower conviction for? One way to think about it is this a peanut M&M or is this a chocolate M&M? Right? Peanut M&M isn't a piece of steel, but you can squeeze it and it's not going to crack immediately. Whereas a chocolate M&M, put some pressure on it, it cracks, right? If it's a peanut M&M and you can actually have a back and forth, you actually have some conviction for your idea, then by all means, share it in the moment. But if it's a chocolate M&M, what backable people tend to do is they tend to avoid, they resist that temptation to share their idea in the moment, as excited as they are. And they take what we call, again, incubation time, where it's quiet time where they can actually start to develop the idea. Now, backable people have different ways of doing this. Some people like to draw. Some people like to just talk out their idea in front of a laptop or a phone. I'm a writer, so I like to write out my ideas. And when I'm writing out my ideas, there's a couple of really key principles to keep in mind. The first is that you want to not just steer into why you're excited about the idea, but you want to steer into what's wrong with the idea. In the book, we call this steering into objections. So at some point in time, you want to take off your excited hat. You want to put on your skeptic hat. And you want to ask yourself, what are the top 2 to 3 reasons this doesn't make sense? Why am I not the right candidate for this job? Or why is this idea not good for this particular investor? And then you want to start to answer those. Now, you're not going to have perfect answers, and that's okay. If you did have perfect answers, it probably wouldn't be a new idea or concept. You probably wouldn't be trying to create change in some way. But just the fact that you can have some back and forth with people about it is what gives you the conviction to create these backable moments.
Suneel, before we go further, in case someone's just tuning in saying, who is this interesting guest that's on The Secrets of Success, would like our audience to know that you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan. Our guest today is Suneel Gupta, spelled Gupta. He is the author of the book Backable. Very easy to remember and a fun read and an interesting book. You'll get a lot of great anecdotes out of it. Suneel, I'm going to ask you where we can get the book, and is there a website where we can learn more?
Yeah, you can. Both of them can be answered with one question, Bill. You can go to backable.com. And if you go to backable.com, you'll learn more about the book. You'll see where to buy it. It's available everywhere. And you'll get some free stuff on the website as well.
Oh, we love that word, free stuff. You'll definitely be a guest who comes back if you offer us free stuff. But honestly, the book in itself is the best part of this. It's a very easy read. You're going to get a lot of great business stories and feel empowered by it, which is what we want for our guest, for our audience, to be able to reach their goals of success. And I loved the certain outtakes that I have from your book. And one is that we all have a special idea in us someplace. So that's given me encouragement. Maybe I haven't hit it yet in the first 70 years of life, but next year, 2 years, 10 years from now, that idea is there. And if you say so, you're teaching at Harvard, so you must know, right?
We all have ideas tucked away somewhere, Bill. Like, there's no doubt in my mind. I think that every single one of us has unused creativity. You know, I play a little game with my daughters every morning. I have an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. And we do a little routine that we developed during the pandemic because, you know, we're spending so much time at home now. And I ask them 2 questions. One is, what is the meaning of life? And they say, to find your gift. And then I say, well, what is the purpose of life? And they say, to give it away. It's all based on this quote from Picasso. And you know, Backable at its core is, how do we take all this stuff inside of us that just hasn't been used, all this creativity, you know, all these ideas that we've had that we've built up over time, and how do we actually put them out into the world? That's because we you know, no matter what, we know that no one ever does it alone. We need other people at some point in time to take a chance on us. That could be hiring managers. That could be teams. That could be our colleagues. It could be anybody. It could even be friends and family. That's what this book is about.
Well, you may have seen me writing that down, to find your gift and give it away. And that's going to be another one of my takeaways. I told you before the show, you had an interesting line in your book, and it was from someone else that you quoted. Apparently, every time someone comes up to them with an idea, they look at the person and go, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard, which would definitely make me shrink, try to hide in a closet, or get away from that person as quickly as possible. But tell us the reason and the strategy behind that.
You and me both, Bill. It made me want to shrivel up too when he said that. Well, you know, so it's Peter Chernin, who used to be the president of 20th Century Fox, has created some really big movies, including Titanic and Avatar, and you know, he's sort of a legend. And now he invests in technology companies as well, but he also creates films. So he's a lot of people go to him for backing. And one of the things that he shared with me is that if he's a clear yes on an idea, then he'll say yes. If he's a clear no on an idea, he'll say no. But if he's on the fence, if he doesn't know, if it's a maybe, then one of the things he will do is he will look at the person who's pitching him and he'll say, that is the stupidest idea that I have ever heard in my entire life. And then he'll wait for their reaction. He'll wait to see if they're going to stand up for the idea and if they're going to defend it, or if they're going to be like, well, I guess it is stupid, and then walk out of the room. If they walk out of the room, then he knows that it wasn't for him. But he wants at that point in time for someone to stand up for their conviction in their idea. What he's testing for in that moment is, do they actually believe? Do you believe all these things that you're saying? Because I can't believe if you don't believe. And so that's his way of really understanding. Is this a chocolate M&M or is this a peanut M&M?
Well, that goes to your point of conviction, which we have to have, and you've told us in your book. And I love it because now if someone says that to me, instead of taking it and making me shrink automatically, I'm going to look at it as a challenge and say, wait, he's halfway there or she's halfway there. Let me see if I can come up with some ideas. And again, you've already answered the next question, because before the break, you had said to us, we should come up with at least, I think, 3 objections to our own idea. Yes. So we're kind of prepared for these conversations. And what most people are probably going to say, it costs too much, we don't need it, it's not practical or something. And yet many of the ideas we see in the world would have been rejected just for those reasons. Is that the strategy?
Oh yeah, 100%, Bill. I mean, I even just take, as we're in the middle of this pandemic and hopefully starting to pull out. I mean, think about some of the other sort of times we've been in similar situations. Take a look at everything that was happening with, infections back in the 1920s. And you had a doctor named Alexander Fleming who came up with penicillin, which was the answer, right? Penicillin has saved nearly 200 million lives to date. It took Fleming nearly 10 years to get people bought in on penicillin. He was out there pitching the idea and getting rejected by different audiences. This was today considered one of the most groundbreaking medications of all time, and it was dismissed. So you can have a great idea. You can be a brilliant candidate for a job. You could have a great vision for your team and still be dismissed. It happens all the time.
Suneel, once again, I want our audience to know if you're enjoying today's interview as much as I am. Our guest is Suneel, spelled Suneel, Gupta, Gupta. He's the author of the book Backable, very easy to remember. And Suneel's going to tell us where we can get it and the website.
Yeah, just go to backable.com. If you go to backable.com, you'll see some free content out there. You'll see where to buy it. It's available everywhere. And for those of you who like audiobooks, are not too annoyed by the sound of my voice, it's available on that as well.
And first of all, it's inspirational in many ways because, again, if someone didn't hear at the beginning, you started out as the poster boy for failure. And you say that, not me. That's the beginning of your book, which you're very kind to share with us. And not only that, but it's a fun read, and our audience knows that's what we look for. Something that's going to grab us as a read because it'll, just as you talk about, it'll keep our interest, it'll bring us in, and a lot of good business ideas that can turn our perhaps failing ideas or dismissed ideas into what we're looking for, that successful breakthrough. So we thank you so much. Now, you mentioned that people seem afraid to put their ideas on paper, and you talk about, first starting with your book, over 100 pages that you wrote were basically thrown away or disposed of. And then I think you talk of Sean Ryan, a TV writer. He had 16 teleplays that were rejected. Tim Ferriss, author of the 4-Hour Work Week, and I think we had Tim on many years ago. 26 publishers turned him down, and he's been on the New York Times bestseller list for years. Why are we so afraid to put things down?
Well, I think we were afraid of throwing away work. You know, we feel like what we need to do, at least I feel, I have felt in the past that I needed to get things right in my head before I put it down on paper, because the last thing I wanted to do was just throw away stuff that I'd put effort into. And, you know, one of the people that really kind of convinced me differently on all of this was an author named Salman Rushdie. And, you know, Rushdie was passing through Chicago. He's one of my favorite authors. And I begged him to spend 10 minutes with me. I emailed him like 4 times. And finally, he was like, all right, enough. Okay, I will. I'll meet you. And so we do. And when I meet him, one of the first questions I asked him was, how do you get inspired to write? And he looks at me and he says, I don't get inspired to write. I just write. Every day I sit down at my desk, kind of like almost like an accountant. And I sit there and I write from like 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day. And the vast majority of what I write is unusable. It goes into the waste paper basket. But buried in each day's pile is a small pearl. And it's actually usable. It's actually pretty good. And over time, what I do is I string together these pearls into sentences and eventually paragraphs and chapters and then eventually books. And that's what I do. And I think when I started to look at writing and creating that way, it freed me up, because now I was able to take all this noise that was inside my head and I was able to put it down on paper and look at it and say, hey, like, does this pass muster? Or does it need to be reevaluated? Does it need to be reworked? But I couldn't get to that point if I didn't do the work to get it down there in the first place. You got to be willing to throw away work.
That's an interesting point, because I think we all think it's going to be that immediate success that we go into, whether it's poetry, a story, a book, or an idea. And I guess that's really the 100th version or 800th version of whatever it is that we come up with, the invention or the formula or the idea. So now you talk about getting the idea across to people, and you talk about an empathy bridge. A lot of people today, I know you use the Dollar Shave Club. I think it's in your book. How do they use that? Can you connect the two and tell us how that's used?
Yeah. You know, you mentioned Tim Ferriss before. Tim was one of the people that I pitched on my idea, this nutrition company. And I felt like he could be a perfect investor because he had just written the 4-Hour Body at that point in time, and he was investing in technology companies. He did not end up investing. He ended up being one of the first dozen plus investors that passed. But he gave me some great advice. And the reason he gave me this advice is because when I pitched him, I had shared all about the market that I was going after, right? The rising rates of diabetes and hypertension and obesity. And then at the very end of my pitch, I told a story. And the story was about my father, who had an emergency triple bypass surgery when he was in his 40s. And I still remember, I was about 9 years old. I remember going to the hospital and just seeing him. It seemed like he had aged 20 years overnight. And when we left the hospital, they gave us a couple of pieces of paper. And on those couple of pieces of paper were things like eat broccoli, eat Brussels sprouts. You know, we were an Indian family. We didn't eat broccoli. We didn't eat Brussels sprouts. That wasn't part of our diet. And so lucky for us, insurance ended up helping to pay for the cost of a nutritionist that really helped turn our life around and help make these habits, these behaviors really stick. Because it's easy sometimes to lose weight. It's hard to keep it off. It's hard to really change long-term behavior. And I believe that nutritionist is a big part of the reason that my father is alive today. And I'm telling Tim this story, and he looks at me and he says, like, why the hell did you keep that story to the very end? Like, why not tell it in the beginning and really bring us into this customer, this type of customer that you're trying to serve? Then you can talk about the numbers. You can zoom out and you can talk about the millions of people who are going through their same version, maybe a different type of problem, but going through their same version of your father's issue, right? They can't make a diet stick. Talk about the numbers after that and the size of the market and, you know, the billions that get spent every year. But first talk about that one person story. And what I started to do that, and I realized that investors were responding very differently. It's story that brings us in. It's substance that keeps us there. You can't just tell a story and then walk away. You got to have both. But story tends to form what we call this empathy bridge, where now you actually start to relate to the person that this idea is trying to serve. Like, who is that central character? And then you can start to answer questions like, well, how many of those people are out there? And how do we reach those people? All the fundamentals of a business idea. But I believe that all that stuff is forgettable unless you first start with that one clear story.
Well, your book seems so simple, but it's so much fun to read. And I'm just thinking as you're talking, I watched the show Shark Tank. I'm sure many of our listeners do. Before anybody goes on that show or even applies, they should be given a copy of your book and say, this is the script. This is what you better learn. Because if you can appeal to people, and if it's something, and those are the ones who do get the money. They come on and the sharks will say to them, you know, that's right. We do need that product for babies or for older people or seniors or whatever. Suneel, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. It was as much fun as the book. So next time you write your next book, please keep us on your hot list.
Hey, Bill, can I ask you one question before we wrap?
Sure.
You were telling me a little bit about your Backable moment. And I think it was you coming on to a radio show as a guest. And maybe you can just tell the listeners real quick, why do you feel like, I mean, maybe you can tell the story, but I'm really interested in why do you think that producer ended up taking a chance on you and making you a radio host?
I think he saw that I enjoy what I did. To go back on the story, 33 years ago, I did a show for someone else. The producer saw it and said, you should be the host on the other side. I guess he saw that I liked to talk. I was engaging with people, and I was a former teacher, so I liked all the aspects about that. And we connected. And that was the beginning for 33 years. And here we are today with you. Otherwise, you and I wouldn't have met. So, but again, the human interest story going back that, friends leading to other friends as part of the story. Yeah. So, Suneel, again, I thank you so much. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so I'm going to have to wrap up. But please keep us in mind for your next book. We want our audience to know the book is Backable by our guest, Suneel Gupta. And one more time, the website?
Backable.com.
Easy enough to remember. You've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we will continue our journey to success.